Welcome to Ride to Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a more productive, creative, and active life. Today, I had the pleasure of chatting with Gordon Miller, the CEO and founder of Ride for Freedom. Gordon is the person that you can really say is using cycling to make a positive change in people's lives. His journey from an observer of injustices to a front runner in the battle against modern slavery encapsulates the power of converting personal passion into a force for global change. Our conversation sheds a light into Gordon's motivations, challenges, and the profound impact of his work through cycling. But before we get into the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, please subscribe wherever you listen to Ride to Success. It helps us to grow the podcast immensely, and I'll be forever grateful. Now, back to the podcast. Welcome, Gordon, to Ride to Success. It's a pleasure having you in the pod.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Pedro.
I've been following you for a while on LinkedIn, and I know a lot about your work. There's a lot of people working in cycling and wanting to make a great difference through cycling, but you are one of those people. And you're making great changes and positive changes through the power of cycling. Just last year, you rode the Tour de France, your own Tour de France, to raise awareness for modern slavery. And yes, you are raised. So it's interesting that you are making a positive change through your actions, through your passion in cycling. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to kind of bring us back a bit more to your earlier career, to your earlier, even perhaps your childhood, and try to understand where the passion for cycling and where your interest in human rights came from. Mm-hmm. So there is a bit more context, and so we can understand a bit more the motivations behind the causes that you are advocating for.
Sure, absolutely. Well, delighted to be here and to have this opportunity to talk about how I'm bringing passion and purpose together, which is what I'm finding increasingly a lot of people are trying to do as well. So for me, how it started, and I really love your question about the childhood thing, because I wasn't an avid cyclist. To be quite honest, I'm 60 now. I didn't even start cycling properly till I was 48. So I was 12 years ago. So I wasn't even an avid cyclist. Obviously, I learned, well, not obviously, but I did learn to ride a bike as a child. But I certainly didn't cycle beyond what most children do back in the day. But one thing that was significant, and I didn't really properly appreciate this until later in my life, that one thing that's always been very much in my mindset is around social justice. And I didn't even know how to frame that at the time. But when I was a young person, I was always very principled around people. If people were being called out for something, I'd want to stand up for them. If people were being, accused of something, then it was something that really resonated with me. And I came to learn later in life that was about social justice, that about people with privilege, not exploiting that privilege, but everybody has the opportunity. And later, when I came to understand what human rights were and things like that, the fundamental human right that we're all born free and equal, in rights and dignity. These are fundamental things. And it wasn't until I say much later in my career, in my life, that I began to sort of bring all these points together. But that happened, in my 20s, I trained as a journalist, and I worked as a journalist for 20 odd years. And that was my first career. I didn't really work in human rights journalism, but I was working in property and real estate journalism. That was my background. And through that, the way that the journey came together was that around the mid 2000s, I started doing a lot of environmental work, writing about how property, the energy performance of buildings, the waste, the water, the recycling. So it was an environmental context. But through that journey, I became more aware because I was doing some international real estate writing, and I was traveling to some countries like Morocco and South Africa and places like this, and I was seeing some of the labor conditions that people were working in, which was absolutely horrific. Quite literally, bamboo scaffolding. things like this,
Of course.
working all
Can you
hours,
imagine?
days and sun. And it really started to resonate with me. And that's when I came to sort of understand this issue of, labor exploitation, human rights, and all these kind of things. And that's when that journey started. And that was in around the 2010, 2012 sort of period when I started to bring these issues together. And that was kind of when I started cycling. So that's kind of when everything almost came together.
Right. So, okay, so there seems to be a pivotal moment through your travels, through you starting to gain awareness of working conditions. So,
Yeah.
how did cycling come?
Mm.
You kind of brushed off that. How did cycling come into this?
Yeah.
How did it start?
Absolutely. Well, how cycling came together was around about 2018. I had this. I started doing a lot of work around 2014, 2015 around the Modern Slavery Act when that came into
Okay.
being in the United Kingdom. So
As a
through that,
journalist or as an advocate and a human rights?
uh,
Okay.
initially, more sort of like the journalism/communications side of things. By that stage, I'd started doing some comms work with a lot of other companies and
Okay.
organisations as a consultant around the human rights aspects, because obviously there's a compliance requirement for a lot of big businesses. So
Mm.
as I began to understand this issue more and more, at the time there were 40 million people in some form of modern slavery. Now there are 50 million people. 10 years down the line, it's getting worse.
How is
One
that
in four.
possible?
How is it possible? It's insane, isn't it? 12 million people are children. 12 million of those 50 million are children, i.e., 1 in 4 are children in some form of labor exploitation. And the more I sort of read about this and the more I dug deep into it and began to understand it, the more I thought, how this is just horrific. How can this be? I'd also reached the stage in my career where I started to want to do some advocacy work. I wanted to become a bit more activist. I'd kind of got to the stage where I was, wasn't really working as a journalist, so I didn't need that independent streak anymore. I was more just like wanting to be some, proper advocate around the issues that I was getting passionate about. And it's kind of like, well, how could I do that? I still had to earn a living, and I thought, well, if I could
Yeah.
bring together passion for cycling, and which I started to form around 2011, 2012. And then if I could bring that together as a combination with my communication skill set, my ability to be able to, obviously communicate through the press, not so much social media at the time, but obviously increasingly that sort of communications. You're a marketer, you understand, that if you've got that skill set and that knowledge around how you can raise awareness of something, then
Exactly.
bring
Yeah.
those two things together. Let's see what happens. And it really started as a side hustle. I think, some person described it to me as that. So back in 2019, it was when I first did a bike ride. And I wasn't, as I say, I wasn't really an avid cyclist at the time. I was pootling. I was pootling around. I was doing a bit. And I decided to do a charity bike ride for two main charities, which I'm still working with even more closely these days, Hope for Justice and Unseen. And I decided to cycle from where I live in London to Manchester, where Hope for Justice's offices are. And then I cycled the following week I got a train to Bristol and then cycled back from Bristol to London, where Unseen's office is in Bristol. So these were just raising awareness, raising some charity, raising some funds for them, doing some charity fundraising. And that's kind of where it started. And it's just grown from there from 2019. People asking me, what do you want to do? How are you going to take this to the next level? And it's just like mushrooms, as these things tend to do.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, aligning your passion, your skill set, and the purpose very neatly there.
Yeah.
So, what point was there? Like there has to be a pivotal point, kind of from 2018 when you started doing these charity rides. At what point did you came up with Ride for Freedom, which is the organization that you founded and you now use to raise awareness for human rights and for more advocacy for modern slavery?
Yeah. Absolutely. It was kind of ironically during COVID. It was 2021. So the sort of the journey that I went on, as I say, it was a side hustle. It was like just me doing some cycling to try and raise awareness. I was still working at the time. I was working with other clients and things like that. But what I managed to do, kind of the pivotal moment, as you describe it, was in 2020 when I decided to do a bike challenge, which I decided to do a Guinness World Record, try and set a Guinness World Record on a bike.
Yes.
To raise awareness. Obviously, we all know if you work in marketing and journalism and PR and communications, then if you do a Guinness World Record, right, it's going to get you more press coverage. So that was the kind of thinking behind it, to raise awareness. I
Yeah.
won't deny I've got a slight ego, but it wasn't fundamentally about doing a Guinness World Record for my own my own ego or whatever. It was more to raise awareness. But it's nice to have one. I've actually had two. But the first one, essentially, I planned GPS mapped and then cycled the words "end modern slavery." So I GPS mapped "end" from Manchester to Doncaster across the north of England, modern across the Midlands, and then slavery across the south from Bristol back to London. So I literally mapped the words and then cycled them, the letters, and then cycled them. And it set a new Guinness World Record. It's called, and I'm just looking at the certificate up there on the shelf.
Oh,
It's
wow.
the longest GPS drawing by an individual on a bicycle. Something of a mouthful. That's what it was.
Yeah. Wow.
It's since been taken. It was something like 600 and odd miles, and there was no time limit. So I could do it. I did it over something like 10 days.
Yeah.
That really raised a lot of awareness. But so a lot of people, and along the route, I called in and spoke to a lot of the organisations that we since work
Exactly. Yeah,
with,
of course.
companies, the likes of Marshalls, who are very influential in the anti-slavery space, organisations like the Rights Lab, again, Hope for Justice and people like that as well. So this was kind of the pivotal moment but the pivotal moment to how this actually went from me just doing this as a cycling thing to raise awareness of the issue. On these numerous bike rides that I was doing, as you know, you spend a lot of time inside your own head when you're doing bike rides. I came up with the
Yeah,
idea that
it does.
whilst it was great on one level to be raising awareness, getting some press coverage of kind of these things, it was a little bit so what, So what difference did that actually make to the individuals who are survivors / victims and have now become survivors of modern day slavery? So what I thought was, if we could set up a program within Ride for Freedom and what we've called our free wheel program to actually support survivors, empower them to cycle by giving them free bicycles,
Yeah.
accessories for free, and training to the bikeability standard, that could that make a significant difference to their lives? I'm sure mental health
Yeah, of
aspects
course. Yeah. Yeah. I
massive.
mean, it's you give a bicycle to someone, you're giving them freedom, you're giving the possibilities to explore, to be more empowered because they have the possibilities to go from places to places, to travel. Yeah, it was.
Exactly. The
The
work,
bicycle itself is a great invention, and
absolutely.
sometimes people overlook it
Yeah.
for other modes of transport. But
People underestimate its power, don't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, and as I rightly said, I think at the beginning of the conversation, is that people some have used cycling to make a positive impact in the world, and everyone that is using the bicycle to drive positive change is turning the bicycle, which is a humble innovation, into a powerful tool to enable someone to gain independence, to earn a living, to wherever they want to do, to just have fun. But I mean, when you think of a child and you give them the bike, it's suddenly just you are opening new doors to new worlds that the child would not even have awareness or considering before having a bicycle. So
Mhm.
yeah, it kind of
So
underscores the importance of the bicycle as a mode of transport to empower people.
100%. So
Hmm.
it was so transformative. But we didn't want to just assume when this was an idea. I can't. As I say, I know that it supports my mental health. I'm feeling a bit blue one day, feeling a bit stressed out. Like yesterday, I jump on the bike, and an hour later, I'm feeling completely different. Your headset's completely turned around just through the endorphin flow, through the psychological the psychological impact of being out in nature. All these kind of great things. I'm fortunate that I live in right on the edge of London, so I turn left and I'm into the countryside. I turn right and I go into
That's
London. So
nice.
I usually try and go left. What we're finding, what I didn't want to just assume was that this would support survivors of modern day slavery. So we actually did a pilot program, and we did a 66-page impact report, which was extensive. We've also got an executive summary, which people can find and read if they wanted to. But what we wanted to show was it supported mental health, physical health, independence, and mobility. And it showed all of those four things. It particularly showed that it does support people's mental health. And that then gave us the catalyst, if you like, and the conviction and the validation that we could then start this program. So we then applied for some funding, and that's kind of when, this pivotal moment, as you say,
Mm.
when
Okay.
Ride for Freedom became just Gordon riding around on his bike doing a few, excessive, expansive, whatever kind of bike rides, pootling around, to actually being a program that was empowering victims and survivors of modern day slavery to cycle. And that's when we set up as we're not a full blown charity. What we're called is a KIC, a CIC, a community interest company, which is a non-profit organization. So obviously we pay salaries and things like that to the people who work on the program, including myself. There's no full transparency around that, but equally the money that we make goes into the programs. And we've subsequently had 34 survivors over the last 18 months since 2021 who've actually come through the program and ridden off on their bicycles. And it's just an incredible thing, incredible.
So I'm interested to. So how the the survivors? How do you get in touch with them? And because this is, I'm sure this is they must have some network of support. How does it work in
Yeah.
the in terms of giving the survivors bicycles, teaching them how to ride a bike if that's necessary? How does that process unfolds?
Yeah. Well, what we do is we're kind of the facilitator, if you like. What we do is we work with charities who support, because we don't directly support survivors on a day-to-day basis, but there are something like 10,000 survivors of modern day slavery in the United Kingdom being supported to rehabilitate their lives, working with charities like Hestia, like Migrant Help, like Medeye Trust, like Snowdrop. There are countless charities. There are more than 20 or so charities in the UK. So we work with these charities, and we call them our referral partner, because they call them their clients. That's the word that they use, not me, but they call the survivors that they work with, their clients. And they refer these clients to us. So we collaborate with them, and we put a shout out through their channels. We don't know who these people are. The anonymity is absolutely paramount for these people, because the chances of being re-trafficked and re-enslaved are absolutely huge. So these people have to have absolute anonymity. We only ever get initials from people beforehand, so we know who the initials are of the people turning up. If they choose to say what their name is, then obviously we will call them by their name. But if they don't choose to, then
Of course.
we use the name. We don't know where they live. We don't announce the dates. We don't announce the venue where the training's done. Nothing, because if an exploitative person or gang wants to try and find that person and re-exploit them, then that's how they can find them. So we're very discreet about it. We talk about where it is. We do a program in East London, and we do it in Barking and Dagenham, and we do a program in West Midlands. We call them free will hubs. One in East London, say one in the West Midlands. So how it actually happens is these survivors are referred to us for a 2-day training session, which is what the bikeability standard is. Day one is bikeability, where people come along, they learn how to use the bicycle, how to indicate, how to check the tires, and the ABCs of a bike, how to handle it. And then day two is when they actually go out on the roads, so they can actually learn where to position themselves on the road for their own safety, how to indicate, how to move, how to maneuver the bike around the roads. A lot of the people we work with are foreign nationals. They're not all foreign nationals. The victims of modern slavery who we work with are men, women, black, white, Asian, young, old. We've had 17, 18-year-olds. We've had a 50-year-olds. So they're a complete cross-sector. Majority of them have been foreign nationals, but not everybody. Some victims of modern slavery are UK-based as well. So it's a huge gamut and range of people.
Yeah. So can you share the stories how cycling is enabling these survivors to find new ways of bettering their lives? Can you share any stories that from the survivors?
Yeah, we can. I mean, again, we're incredibly discreet and protective of the people. But if they choose to speak, then obviously we're happy for them to tell their stories and for us to relay their stories. We've actually interviewed 3 people in one of the first sessions we ever did on camera. They were happy to speak on camera, and those have been published. But essentially, some of the stories are, one of the previous session we did in the West Midlands, One woman, she came on the session and she was so nervous, she could barely sort of like, she was that shaky and handling the bike
Right.
that she was almost, she hadn't ridden since she was a child. She was probably in her 30s, I would say. And by the end of the session, she literally came up to me and says, I can't believe how much more confident I feel, not just on the bicycle, but in my life, and this was like, as a PR or a journalist, you couldn't write a quote that was that great. It's like, this is helping me to transform my life. And it's just like, wow, that is so, the power of the bicycle is immense, and the confidence that it gives people.
Yeah.
So that, that's other things. And other people have said things to us like, I've never seen my friends in my house, survival in the safe house that people live in. I've never seen them smile so much on a day out. These kind of amazingly rewarding and empowering and gratifying quotes that people give you. Nobody's turned around and said, I hated that. I can't believe why I bothered to do that. A few people probably haven't got as much out of it as other people, but there's
Yeah.
been, the impact. We monitor and evaluate everything. We ask people questions before they come. We ask people questions afterwards, and the upsides of it are, everybody gets some kind of physical and mental health benefits.
Yeah. And do they go after these workshops that they have with you, these learning sessions? Do they go off with a new bike? After learning these skills, is this part of the program for them to get a bike through
Yeah,
your
it's not a
program,
new.
through Free Will?
Yeah, sure. It's not a new bike. It's pre-loved, as we call
Yeah,
them.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
mhm.
yeah. So we either get the bikes donated to us, or if we haven't got enough donated bikes at the time when we need them, we will buy some in second-hand bikes in specifically the type of bike they want. I mean, most people want straight bars; they don't want drops.
Yeah,
They want an urban bike which they can pedal around. They're not these. I wouldn't say. Maybe two or three of the people have been avid cyclists, but most of them are just people who want something that gives them some mobility. Because a lot of these people, they have
exactly. Yeah.
very little income, so that, it
Mm.
helps them to actually, to get to the shops, to cycle, to job interviews, these kind of things. It's a very practical tool rather than it is, the likes of ourselves who want
Yeah,
to get
yeah,
out,
yeah.
do lots of mileage. But they get to keep the bikes. That is so important because so
Mm.
that, when they turn up for the session, they've pre-said to us, I'm certain height, so I want a medium bike. I'd want straight bars. I prefer it to be, a mountain bike type, or I prefer it to be, an urban bike or whatever. And when they turn up, they try out the bike, make sure it's the right height, size, looks good for them, and
Yeah.
then they train on that bike, and then they get to keep it. So
Mhm.
important. I mean, if we didn't let them keep it, it would be worse than not having it in the first place, in my opinion. Yeah, because you build up
Yeah,
all this
yeah.
confidence and
I mean, well, it would perhaps it would defeat the purpose of the program. That you are giving these people the tools, empowering them. No, sorry, you're empowering them and giving them the skills, but then they need the tool, which is the bicycle. And
yeah,
yeah, the bicycle is in its basic form a mode
yeah,
of transportation.
yeah.
So in its basic form, it's from A to B. So
So it's amazing. It's just an incredible program, and our
mhm,
ambition is to scale this. To scale it around the country. There are safe houses in every single region: Kent, Northeast, Northwest, Yorkshire, Bristol, Southwest,
yeah,
Wales, you name it. We could run this program everywhere. The only thing we need is more funding, and that's what we're applying for at the moment. We can apply for funding for, to the National Lottery and people like this to try and expand the program. Because sadly, it's needed. This isn't something that's going to go away. Modern day slavery, it's, as I said,
no.
it's increasingly so. There are more
I mean, can
survivors.
you talk a bit about how is it possible that it is increasing? Because so from my research into Right for Freedom, so you started a campaign that is show the red card, and you're
Mm,
using the power of football
mm,
to raise awareness.
mhm,
Yes, exactly. Yeah. To raise awareness through to football fans about modern for the problems of modern slavery.
mm.
And this is kind of an interesting kind of merging point where you are using cycling as a vehicle to promote and then you are at the intersection where you are cycling meets football fans and advocacy. And can you
Hmm.
just share a bit more
Mm,
about your campaign showing the red card, and
sure.
why is it so important, and if you can tie in with the rise of modern slavery in recent years?
Sure, absolutely. Well, what it fundamentally comes down to is there's four pillars that we focus on: advocacy, education, and then collaboration, and then remediation. So obviously, the remediation is the free will program. The collaboration is what we do by collaborating with lots of different partners. The likes of Aviva and Biffa are partners of
Okay.
ours, lots of other organizations. So we collaborate with them to put on bike rides and things like that to raise awareness amongst their employees and their colleagues and their staff, but also, about with their supply chains and their client base, but also, obviously through the communication of the rides that we do on social media. It shares the message amongst everybody as well. And it's
Yeah,
one way of funding the organization, obviously, because the partners put money in a pot to help us to run the organization. The
of
education
course.
piece is we go into schools. Obviously, we're educating people all the time. Everything that we do is educational, but very prioritized is a program where we've done a pilot program in East London, embarking in Dagenham again last year, where we went into 6 primary schools. Excuse me, and we talked to children through the assemblies about what modern day slavery is, how they can spot the signs. On the rear of the red
Yeah.
card is the yellow card. There you go.
Ah.
One of my colleagues, Lisa, came up with this idea, so she's the genius behind this. But it's Spot the Signs is the acronym that we use so that children can begin to understand. We use an acronym called SUITS, which is scared, untidy, isolated, tired, and the same clothes, which are indicators of somebody who may
Okay.
be a victim of modern day slavery. Again, we do this through the lens of cycling. So we set up static bicycles in the playground, and the children get to ride on them. At the end of the assembly session. 20% of the children that we've had come through the program have never cycled before. They cycle backwards when they get on the pedal. So we know that gives an indication that they've never cycled before. So, the kind of intersection here between education and modern day slavery, but also physical and mental health benefits, giving the children a sense of the freedom that survivors get when they cycle. Again,
Yeah.
that's, a very empowering thing. And they're becoming the advocates. Some of the schools we've been into, we've been back to one school. There were 5 ambassadors around modern day slavery to begin with. There are now 20 of them, because they're so passionate. The head teacher is so passionate about this whole issue. So that's kind of, if you like, those are the 3 pillars there: the education, the collaboration,
Yeah.
the remediation. When it comes to the advocacy, we came up with the idea of a campaign, as you say, to show a red card. Obviously, the symbolism of the red card in football, you're sending someone off. So we're sending off modern day slavery. But the connection between that and football is because there was a study, the US government trafficking in persons report from 2020, that evidenced there are 15,000 victims of modern day slavery every year who are trafficked from Africa, particularly West Africa, into Europe in the name of football. So essentially, it's called
Right.
false promises. They're promised trials with football clubs that don't exist. And it's a way of seducing people to trafficking, to be able to traffic them. And then once they come into Europe, they're then trafficked. They're then forced into criminal activities, exploitation, labor,
Right. Okay.
sexual, you name every kind of terrible, terrible kind of exploitation and form of modern day slavery. So I couldn't believe that 15,000. That's a hell of a lot of people.
It
So
is. Yeah.
yeah, it's incredible. So that's when we started this red card campaign, because the thinking was, obviously the bike rides that we do. I mean, and the first one that we did, the plan was in 2020 was actually to cycle between for the Euros, because it was held in the Euro Championship, the National Football Championship was held
Yeah.
across Europe until COVID hit it, and then it mostly got truncated into the UK. So instead
Exactly.
of
Yeah.
being able to do that, what I did was I
Mm.
cycled between all the Premier League clubs, 20 of them, and I cycled all the way up to Newcastle and then all the way back down via the Midlands and the South and so on, to show this red card and to actually collaborate with the clubs, the likes of Liverpool, Burnley, Wolves. Several of them really had a good engagement with us, because the thinking is,
Mm.
and was and is, if we actually raise awareness of this issue amongst the football clubs and they get behind it, then that's going to dissuade the traffickers and the criminal organisations and educate the children to not be exploited. Because obviously, this isn't how
Yeah.
football trials happen. But the children in Africa, because the poverty is very high, and also the attraction around being a footballer is massive, that we wanted
Yeah.
to, we thought we could raise awareness of this. So that's where it
Yeah.
began in the United Kingdom. I've cycled around all the German Premier Bundesliga clubs. I've cycled around football clubs in Spain, in northern Spain, in the Basque Country when I did the Tour de France, the first 3 stages of that last year. I love football as well. I won't deny that.
Yeah.
I love my football, so there is a sort of selfish motivation in there as well. But obviously, the fundamental thing is there are 15,000 people trafficked each year in football.
Yeah, of course. I mean, football is huge. So if you can capture the attention of fans, you are already getting a big percentage of people that are at least they are noticing your message.
You got it.
So
Absolutely.
that's a big crucial part
Yeah,
to raising awareness for it, to the program and to modern slavery as well.
absolutely.
So I mean, I'm interested to you mentioned about the ambassadors that you have in schools, the children that are advocating for the
Mm,
stopping modern day slavery.
mm,
How as part of your program, do you have does cycling come into like as part of the program? Does You mentioned there was the static bikes, but am I right in saying there are also ambitions or already plans in place to make it more dynamic in
mm.
actually involving cycling as activate cycling or teach young children cycling? Can you just
Mm.
expand a bit on that?
Sure. I mean, that's an aspiration ultimately, but it is incredibly resource demanding to be able to do that. So that's kind of growth model, if you like, but it's not something
Yeah.
that is immediately on the horizon. But it's something,
Okay.
that why not? I mean, in the same way that if you like the free will program, the sessions are a couple of days. In an ideal world, we'd love to be encouraging like lived experience, the survivors themselves, to be setting up cycling clubs, amongst their
Yeah.
community. Again, they don't need to be avid cycling clubs. It can just be people getting together for a little bike ride once or
Yeah. Of
twice a week.
course. Yeah.
We'd
Hmm.
love to be encouraging more children, because the infrastructure, one of the probably biggest problems. I literally read something today. I don't know if you saw the post on social media that somebody's said in the House of Commons recently. You ask children, you go into school and you say to children, "How many of you cycled to school today?" Virtually nobody puts a hand up. You ask how many children, if you could cycle into school today, how many would you? How many would of you would do? And virtually every single hand goes up, because the children, there's no infrastructure for the children. The site, there's no cycle paths. It's not safe. They don't have access to bikes, etc.
Yeah.
So there's a
Exactly.
huge
Yeah.
enthusiasm for it, but what there isn't is the infrastructure and the resources to be able to do it. So we'd love to both deepen our reach, if you like, by
Yeah.
having
Hmm.
more children, actually giving them bikes and actually setting up cycling clubs. And we'd also like to expand it, because one of the programs that we've got going around the red card is in Nigeria, where because that's one of the main countries where people are trafficked from, and we've got a
Right.
schools program, pilot program going out there as well, where we've got a country representative, a guy called Timek Pan, and he actually went to AFCON recently, the African Cup of Nations, and he was showing the red card there. So again, to highlight the issue over there. So we're really keen to deepen and expand. I mean, the biggest challenge is resources, capacity building, obviously, things like that, and funding. Fundamentally, if somebody came here and gave us £1 million, we could do a phenomenal amount of work. It's just a question of time and having
Well,
impact.
yeah, exactly. There's the willing and there is the potential is there. I mean, and you seem to have already established the blueprint for
Yeah,
to empower and to use the power of cycling to make a significant change on these people's lives. So
thank you.
I guess it's the question of now the resources that need to come as well to build it up. I mean,
Exactly.
is there um I was just going to ask, beyond the programs, do are you in terms of the impact that you're wanting to achieve? You mentioned that the plans for nationwide programs in several cities across the country.
Mhm.
How reticent are councils or organizations to the project, to your vision?
Mm. Um, on paper, everybody thinks it's a brilliant idea. There's nobody who sort of like thinks, "I can't believe what you're doing. What are you doing that for? That's just ludicrous or stupid or whatever." Everybody thinks it's a great program. What the biggest challenge is because of the economic downturn that we're experiencing, the recession. I believe we're in a recession.
Mhm.
That's the biggest challenge, that councils have no money. Councils are going bust. Birmingham Council went bust a few weeks ago. Other councils are
Yeah,
incredibly in dire straits. So there's very little financial resource around. That's one of the biggest challenges. Because we're as a charity or as a non-profit, we're not a charity, as I said, but we're a non-profit. We're put into the discretionary spend bucket by most corporations, most
yeah,
organizations, and when quite, I guess, it's understandable, but if they're making people redundant and having to cut back on all these things, they don't have any discretionary spend. So therefore that corporate donation pot is limited at present as well, which means more people are applying for funds and to grants.
yeah. Of course,
Which
yeah.
means it's harder to win grants. So sort of this sort of kaleidoscope of different aspects, which are making it incredibly demanding to be able to furnish revenue. So
Yeah,
you've probably seen, we're always asking for donations. Too many of
of
our
course.
posts shout out for donations, but it's one of the ways we've managed to keep our wheels turning, by people donating, by either doing the bike rides with us or setting up their own bike rides and fundraising for us along the way or whatever. So
Yeah,
everybody thinks it's a great model, to answer your question, but it's really the restrictions and limitations around funding which is the
the big
challenge.
problem, the big hurdle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean,
mm,
in like speaking in broader terms now,
mm,
how do you? I mean, how do you see or do you envision the future of cycling as a tool for advocacy?
mm,
Do you see it as a powerful tool to change people's minds, especially right for freedom? It's clear that it is a great driver, a force for good.
mm,
But like thinking about kind of more in wider terms, do you think cycling has the potential and the power to really drive change?
mm. I really truly believe it does. I mean, the potential is absolutely huge, on so many levels, to move the
Mhm.
dial, from an environmental perspective, obviously, as well as a social, perspective, the social impact that we're making, but, also that has environmental upsides too. But if somebody wanted to, I don't know, ride for green or, whatever, there are so many opportunities to harness whatever your passion or your pastime is, whether be it cycling or be it, I don't know, rowing or sewing. Do you know what I mean? You
Yeah,
can
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you can use your pastime to have social impact, and that social impact doesn't have to be obviously supporting survivors of modern day slavery. It can be any kinds of social impacts. It could just be more of a social thing. That it's helping people with their community and their mental health and all these kind of things. So there are so many different aspects to it, but specifically cycling, I think, you know unfortunately, the transport lobby and the car lobby and all that sort of stuff, is making it very difficult in the United Kingdom to get cycling to be more front and center. But you look in places like the Netherlands and Germany. Germany isn't talked about that much, but I couldn't believe it when I cycled around it, how the infrastructure. I barely cycled on a road. I was
right.
just
Wow,
using paths virtually all the way, and it's obviously the Netherlands is the poster the
is the
poster
beacon? Yeah,
yeah, but Germany has got an incredible infrastructure, for cycling as well, and so the potential of it is absolutely huge.
definitely.
For environment.
I mean, you touched upon the fact also cycling has the power to drive awareness for sustainability and environmental issues, and I believe you have also so you have partnered with other people that are advocating for sustainability causes and environmental causes.
Mm,
And so you are working together. So obviously there is through cycling as well is a, I mean, it's a kind of difficult uh, topic, in my view, when we talk about cycling as a sustainable
mm,
industry, which is kind of a false truth.
mm,
But when
mm.
can you please share like your experience of working, because you from my research you have been also working with people that are raising awareness for environmental issues, and
Mm,
how are environment how sorry how are
mm.
environmental issues contributing factors as well for the rise of modern slavery?
Sure, absolutely. Well, one of the fundamental things is this year we're doing a tour with called the Wales Tour. So we're
Yeah,
basically cycling the length of Wales in from the 13th to 17th of May, and a really passionate and well known environmentalist and cyclist, a woman called Kate Strong, is going to
yeah,
cycle with us on the first day of that ride. Out of Cardiff, she's going to guide us out of Cardiff. I cycled with Kate the other month when she did an activation when she cycled between Forest Green in the West Country across to Colchester on the Green Football weekend, and I cycled half of the way with her as well. I'm getting to know Kate, and the reason why we brought this together and the concept, the idea behind this particular ride is it's obviously to raise awareness, but there is increasingly this linkage between climate change creating conditions for modern slavery to be perpetrated. So
right,
essentially, what happens is, if you can imagine it in some of the places in South Asia and places like that, where there is really the consequences of climate change is forcing people to have to leave their homes,
yeah, of
literally the
course, yeah,
islands that they're based on and things like that. So the only places that they end up going to is that they're if you like, they're migrants, and they're migrating into cities where they have no footing, no standing, no relations, no nothing. So the potential for them to be exploited, labor exploitation, which is obviously a form of modern day slavery, is absolutely huge because they
right,
have no.
okay, mm.
They will be, they will be, if they can find any work at all, they'll probably be coerced into doing work at very, very poorly paid work. If they can't find work, then the women and the young boys, young men could be sexually exploited, which again is
Yeah,
another form of modern day slavery. So this conflation of climate change and modern day slavery is increasingly a pressing issue, particularly as I say in parts of the world where we're not necessarily seeing it to that extent in the United Kingdom at this point in time, but there is definitely, we're seeing, the amount of flooding that's going on and things like this, which are causing
yeah,
issues where labour
it's a
exploitation.
it's an issue that is present as well.
Mm,
It's all. I mean, it's
increasing.
worth talking about it because it's also relevant to the work you are doing, but also as it raises the awareness as well to the issue. So it's important to at least mention it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, it's sadly, it's only going to become worse, as
Mm,
climate catastrophe becomes an ever more pressing matter. And the
exactly. Yeah.
conditions for this are only going to grow. So we want to raise awareness
Mm,
of it. And it also gives a different dynamic to what we're doing, obviously, to try and raise awareness. Because if you just keep doing the same thing endlessly, people tend to switch off to it. So you've got to try and find a different angle. And, obviously a tangible and integral with integrity as well. It can't just be something that's made up just for the sake of trying to get a bit of press coverage. It has to be
exactly.
something
Yeah.
genuine at the same time. So
I
I
mean,
think it's
so I mean, with that answer, it kind of leads me to I mean, you obviously you talk about the purpose. Um,
Mm.
I mean, what for you personally? What has been the learnings and the reflections that you take from your journey since its inception until
Mm.
now of Right for Freedom?
Good question. It's an interesting one. I mean, I'll be quite honest with you. I mean, I don't like being in the public spotlight. I don't enjoy it, but I've realised that, if that's what it takes to raise awareness of this cause and this issue, then that's something that I'll do. Then I'm increasingly, the more you do it, the easier it gets. But it's
Yeah,
still not something I particularly enjoy doing. But I'm trying to think about the bigger cause here and think about how that can help. And obviously, I'm hugely motivated to get on my bike. So there is selfish motivation that, the more that I can do this, the more I can get on my bike at the same time. So I won't deny that, because I think that would be wrong to say that it's not about that. But equally, it's fundamental to my own personal learning that I think as your growth as an individual, getting yourself out there and is challenging, but it's also ultimately can move you forward in your life and help you with, I don't know, some of the issues that you might encounter along the way. So I think that's personally a positive thing. I guess the more I do the cycling, the more I thoroughly enjoy the cycling as well. I set myself more longer challenges. I'm actually doing Chase the Sun, the northern version this year, which will be my longest ever bike ride. It'll be a 200-mile bike ride in a day.
In one go. In one
day. Yeah.
Oh,
Fortunately,
in one
it's
day. Yeah.
the longest day of the year, so there's going to be 17 hours of daylight in the north of England. It starts in Whitley Bay in the northeast, and then it goes across to Ayr in the southeast, southwest.
Yeah. You didn't mention, but you were also once the Guinness World Record holder for the longest. So the longest distance ridden in 1 week. Is that correct?
Yes, on an e-bike.
On an e-bike. Oh.
Yes, an e-bike. It was a pedal assist. Didn't have an accelerator, sadly. Otherwise, it would have been a lot quicker. But no, it's pedal assist. So yeah, essentially, I'm an ambassador for Orbea. So Orbea asked me to ride different bikes. I've ridden gravel bikes. Currently riding a mechanical Orca.
Okay.
That bike is called a Gain. It's an Orbea Gain bike, which has pedal assist on it. So you go up to 25k an hour, and then it cuts out. So you don't get anything if you go above that. But yeah, essentially I cycled from Cadiz in southern Spain to where Orbea's headquarters are in Malavia in northern Spain, in the Basque Country. And I did just over 1,060 miles in a week. And that broke the existing Guinness World Record for the longest distance. But ironically, the longest distance not on an e-bike is far more. I think someone's done it about 3,000 miles in a week, which is just incredible. So it was still a heck of a challenge, and it raised the reason why I did it in that route was because that's a documented human trafficking route. People traffic from Africa up into northern Europe, traffic through Spain and through Italy. So everything I do, every bike ride I try and do, apart from my training rides around my own neighborhood, there's some symbolism to some reference to modern day slavery and so on. So every
there's the purpose right there. I think that's a key aspect of what the kind of threaded this whole conversation is. The purpose that you have has been always present in the work you've been doing, whether it is recreational as your hobby, your passion, the cycling, but also your advocacy work that you kind of use cycling as a vehicle to also to promote it. So working for Right for Freedom, obviously there is huge benefits for, but for you personally, what does success look like? Does success look like? Is it intertwined with the work you do, Right for Freedom, or is there a more personal motivation?
It's a really good question. I've really thought about it in those terms. For me, the success for Ride for Freedom, what really motivates, empowers me, and really moves me is doing the work with the survivors. I enjoy doing the work with the children, but when you're actually working with people who are victims of something as heinous as modern day slavery, that goes back to my this thing that's been in me since I was a kid. This social justice element. And I don't really know where that comes from. I don't understand it necessarily where it comes from. But it just makes the hair on the back of my head stand up. When I read about these things, it makes me, brings out the anger in me, the frustration in me. It just really winds me up. So when you can actually work with people where you can see the power of just helping them with something really quite small, in many people's eyes, helping them to cycle and how that can really make a difference to their lives, the compassion that gives, that just moves me, and that to me is what the success of the program is, and it really sort of rewards me on a personal level. I think I'm maybe doing something purposeful with my life rather than just being a selfish cyclist, a narcissistic cyclist, which most cyclists are, I'm told. So I'm actually that's that just moves me forward and gives me a sense of purpose in life. That's what the success is.
Yeah, very
I'm
good.
not motivated usually by money and things like that. I'm more
Yeah,
motivated by purpose and
I
making a
mean
difference
that's
in.
the your ideal of success, your vision for success is very tangible, because if you are changing, even if it's just one person's life and enabling them to gain mobility, get better mental health, just feel empowered, you know, your work is done, so to speak. But one at a time, it's great rewarding to see that change,
Yeah,
with just a simple bicycle.
exactly. Yeah, it's incredible that the difference it can make. And
Exactly. Yeah.
that moves things forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a great conversation, and it comes
Thank you.
to I come to the point where where I started a tradition in our podcast, where each guest leaves a question to my next guest. The question that was left for you is the following,
Okay.
and I think it's a very good one. Uh, we might have already touched on it, but I'll leave you to answer it. So,
Okay.
what's one thing you would do each day to improve your right success?
Wow. Okay. So it's essentially, what can you do today to improve tomorrow? I think something along the lines of just being active and trying to do some active, whether that's activation or whether that's just being active to try and make a difference. I think that's the one thing that we can all do, whether that's the way that we frame a post, the way that we frame a conversation or something like that. Actually thinking about how you can actually make a difference, not just for ourselves personally, for our own
Yeah,
motivation, whether that's financial or whether that's, I don't know, enjoyment or whatever, but think about how that can actually resonate. There can be wins. There can be win. You can have a win for yourself, but also win from other people by what you're doing.
exactly.
In many terms, I'm getting a win by cycling more, but I'm also, through doing that, I'm also giving wins to other people at the same time. So just try and think about how there can be mutual benefits and mutual upsides to the actions that we do on a daily basis. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
once you break it down a little bit like that, it isn't that difficult to actually, try and do
No,
something just to have
it can be just an act of kindness to someone else.
yeah.
Can be
You
something more with a bigger purpose that what you're doing. Yeah, yeah. Very good answer. Very good
yeah,
answer.
you framed that really well. It can just be an act of kindness, yeah, absolutely, on a daily
Yeah.
basis. Yeah, yeah.
So now it's your turn to leave a question to my next guest. So this is kind of the time of the podcast where I put you on the spot and
Okay,
make you come up with a question for my next guest.
right. Thanks for that. I think it may be maybe because you kind of framed the questions slightly earlier, but I'm kind of thinking, what piece of advice or guidance or life lesson or something like that has somebody had that, and what difference has it made to them, what the effect has it had on them, and how did it help shape their journey? I guess if you could probably frame that far better, but what piece of advice or guidance have you been given, and how has that helped to shape your life? Does
Very
that
good
work?
question. Gordon, it has been a pleasure. I hope that people listening have at least gained awareness of right to freedom. I certainly learned a few things. So yeah, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Pleasure being on here. Thank you so much, Pedro, and all the best with the podcast. I've listened to every one so far, and I'll no doubt be listening to this one as well.
I think you'll agree with me that Gordon's journey with right to freedom underscores the profound impact that one individual's passion, combined with action, can have on addressing some of our time's most pressing human rights issues. As Right for Freedom pedals forward, it carries the hopes of countless individuals looking towards a future free from the chains of modern slavery. I think Gordon's work exemplifies how cycling, often seen as a simple mode of transportation or leisure activity, can become a powerful tool for social change and advocacy. Now, before you go, please remember to tune in to my next week's podcast, where Gordon's question will be answered by a surprise guest. Until then, thanks for listening and see you soon.